They bought silver to protect their wealth. Now they're being charged with sabotage. China arrested 50 private citizens last month. Each held massive silver stockpiles, over 100 tons per person, 5,000 tons total. The government accused them of undermining economic stability by hoarding strategic materials. These weren't black market dealers. These were wealthy businessmen, families who saw inflation coming, investors who diversified into hard assets, and the state called them criminals, seized every ounce, and made an example. The message to everyone else: silver isn't an investment anymore. It's a state resource, and if you hold too much, you're not smart. You're a saboteur. China made the first move. The rest of the world is watching and preparing. Ladies and gentlemen, Asian guy here. Let me show you the document that leaked out of Beijing, the document they didn't want the world to see. Ministry of State Security, Internal Directive 2025-47, dated December 3rd. Subject: Strategic Resource Accumulation Investigation. The directive authorized raids on private precious metals storage facilities across 6 provinces: Shenzhen, Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, Chengdu, Hangzhou. Target profile: individuals or entities holding more than 100 metric tons of silver, roughly 3.2 million ounces per person. The language in the directive is clinical. Subjects engaged in behavior detrimental to national economic security through excessive accumulation of strategic industrial materials. Translation: they bought too much silver, and now it's a crime. The raids happened simultaneously. December 8th, 4 a.m. local time. State security teams with warrants, forensic accountants, asset seizure specialists, 50 locations, 50 arrests, 5,000 tons of silver confiscated, and the state media ran exactly one story, 3 paragraphs, buried on page 11. Authorities dismantle economic sabotage network. No names, no details, no follow-up. Just, we took their silver, and we're calling them criminals. Now let me show you who these people actually were. Let me show you the profile of the saboteurs. Subject A, tech entrepreneur, made fortune in semiconductor manufacturing. Started buying silver in 2018, accumulated 150 tons over 7 years. Stored in a bonded warehouse in Shenzhen, legal, documented, taxes paid. Subject B, real estate developer, family wealth going back 3 generations. Diversified into precious metals in 2020 during COVID, bought 200 tons, vaulted in Shanghai Free Trade Zone. Subject C, former government official. Retired in 2015, used pension and savings to buy silver bars. 120 tons accumulated slowly, stored in private vault licensed by provincial government. These weren't criminal masterminds. These weren't smugglers or money launderers. These were wealthy individuals who made a legal investment decision. They looked at inflation. They looked at currency debasement. They looked at the deficit. And they bought silver. 7 years ago, that was smart. That was prudent. That was protecting your family. Today, it's economic sabotage. The charge is very specific, very calculated. Hoarding strategic resources during a period of national industrial shortage. Let's break that down. Strategic resources. Silver is now classified as a strategic resource in China. Same category as rare earth elements, lithium, uranium, materials critical to national security and economic development. Once something is strategic, private ownership becomes conditional. The state has discretion. The state decides how much is too much. And apparently, 100 tons is too much. Hoarding. Not holding, not investing. Hoarding. That's an emotional word. It implies greed. It implies selfishness. It implies taking from others. The state is framing these investors as hoarders, as people who took metal away from factories that need it, away from the solar industry, away from the EV manufacturers. They didn't. They bought it years ago when supply was abundant. But the framing doesn't care about facts. The framing creates justification. During a period of shortage, this is the key phrase, this is the justification for retroactive criminalization. When they bought the silver, there was no shortage. The market was liquid. The price was low. Supply was plentiful, but now there's a shortage. And the government is looking for someone to blame. And they found 50 people with large stockpiles. Convenient. Here's what happened to the metal. Here's where the 5,000 tons went. It didn't go to auction. It didn't get sold on the open market. It didn't get redistributed to investors. It went directly to state-controlled refineries, to be melted down, to be fed into the industrial supply chain, the solar industry, the EV manufacturers, the electronics assembly plants, the factories that are running short because of the global deficit. The government just solved their supply problem by confiscating private wealth and calling it law enforcement. This isn't nationalization. Nationalization requires compensation. The government pays market value and takes the asset. This is confiscation, criminal charges, no compensation. The owners are in detention, the silver is gone, and the legal framework doesn't allow appeals because it's not a civil matter. It's a criminal matter. Economic sabotage. You don't get your silver back after serving your sentence. It's gone, forfeited to the state, permanently. Now let's talk about the precedent. Let's talk about what this means for everyone else who owns silver in China. If 100 tons is the threshold for arrest, what about 50 tons? What about 10 tons? What about 1 ton? Well, the law doesn't say. The directive doesn't specify a safe amount. It just says excessive accumulation. Excessive is subjective. Excessive is whatever the government decides it is. Today it's 100 tons. Tomorrow it could be 10 tons. Next month it could be 1,000 ounces. There's no legal certainty anymore. No clear line. Just discretion and fear. Every wealthy individual in China who owns silver is now asking the same question. Am I next? Do I hold too much? Should I sell? Should I hide it? Should I move it overseas? And the answer is, there's no safe move, because the government has already proven they can change the rules retroactively. You bought it legally, doesn't matter. You paid taxes, doesn't matter. You followed every regulation, doesn't matter. If the state decides you have too much, you're a criminal. Let me show you the ripple effect. Let me show you what's happening in the private vaults right now. Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai, the offshore storage hubs where Chinese wealth flows. We're seeing unprecedented withdrawal requests. Chinese nationals pulling silver out of vaults, not to sell, to relocate. But relocate where? If China can raid domestic vaults, what stops them from pressuring allied countries, from demanding extradition of the metal? Hong Kong is already integrated. Singapore has extradition treaties. Dubai might bend under diplomatic pressure. There's nowhere to hide. Not really. Not if you're a Chinese citizen with significant assets. So some are selling, flooding the market, driving premiums down in Asia, trying to convert silver into other assets before it gets seized. Others are holding and hoping they're below the threshold, hoping their 20 tons isn't excessive, hoping the state doesn't lower the bar. And a few are doubling down, buying more, saying, if they're going to take it anyway, might as well stack while I can. The psychology is fractured. Nobody knows the right move, so they're making all moves simultaneously. Now let's talk about the quiet part, the part the directive doesn't say but everyone understands. This isn't about economic sabotage. This is about supply shortage. China's solar industry needs 180 million ounces of silver per year. China's domestic production, 110 million ounces. They import the rest. But imports are tightening. Canada stopped exporting. Mexico might follow. Peru prioritizes domestic. China looked at the math. They looked at the deficit, and they realized, we don't have enough. So what do you do when you're facing a strategic shortage? You don't let private citizens hoard the resource. You take it, and you justify it with legal language. Economic sabotage, national security, hoarding. But the real reason is simple. The factories need it. The state needs it. And the state is more important than you. This is resource nationalism in its purest form. The individual serves the collective. Your property rights are conditional. And when the state needs your assets, your rights disappear. Let me show you the historical parallel. Let me show you where this leads. United States, Executive Order 6102. President Roosevelt orders all private gold turned into the Federal Reserve. The justification? Hoarding gold was causing the Depression to worsen. People needed to release the gold so the economy could function. The penalty for noncompliance, $10,000 fine, 10 years prison, and confiscation anyway. American citizens had to surrender their gold. They got $20.67 per ounce. The government then revalued gold to $35 per ounce, 70% profit, stolen from the citizens. That was gold in America in 1933. This is silver in China in 2025. The playbook is the same. Declare a crisis, criminalize ownership, confiscate the asset, redistribute to the state. The difference, America at least compensated owners. China is charging them with crimes. And if it can happen in China, if it can happen to gold in America, what makes you think it can't happen again? What makes you think your government won't look at the silver shortage and decide, we need that metal more than our citizens do? Now let's talk about the cascade. Let's talk about which countries are watching and learning. India, the second largest silver consumer after China. The government already heavily restricts gold imports. Silver might be next. If India follows China's model, if they start labeling large holders as saboteurs, that's another 100 million ounces that could be confiscated. Russia, already authoritarian, already controlling resources, already restricting exports of strategic materials. How long before Putin declares private silver holdings above a certain threshold are threats to national security? Europe, facing energy crisis, facing industrial decline, facing pressure to meet green targets. If the factories can't get silver, if the solar mandates are failing, how long before the EU decides private stockpiles need to be mobilized? Even the United States, the land of property rights, the land of free markets. But in a crisis, property rights get suspended. Emergency powers activate, the Patriot Act, the War Powers Act. Executive orders? If the Pentagon can't source silver for defense systems, if critical infrastructure is failing, do you think property rights survive? History says, no, every crisis justifies new powers, and those powers never get returned. Let me show you the signal this sends to the global market. Let me show you what China just told the world. Signal 1, the shortage is real. If the shortage was fake, if there was plenty of silver, the government wouldn't need to confiscate private stockpiles. They're taking it because they need it, because the factories are running dry, because the supply chain is failing. Signal 2, the deficit can't be solved by price. If high prices could solve the shortage, the market would solve it. Miners would produce more, recyclers would process more, but China isn't waiting for the market. They're seizing assets. That means they don't believe the market can provide what they need in time. Signal 3, sovereignty over silver is dead. It doesn't matter who bought it. It doesn't matter who holds the title. If the state decides it's strategic, it's theirs. This is the death of private property rights for strategic commodities. And silver just became strategic. Now let's talk about the propaganda. Let's talk about how China is justifying this to its citizens. State media ran stories about the arrests. Very short stories, very specific framing. Authorities cracked down on speculators hoarding resources needed for national development. Excessive accumulation of industrial materials prevented factories from accessing supplies. Individuals prioritized personal profit over collective economic stability. Notice the language: speculators, hoarders, individuals versus collective. They're painting the victims as villains, as greedy capitalists who took from the people, who caused the shortage by their selfishness. The reality: these people bought silver years ago when it was abundant. They didn't cause the shortage. The shortage is caused by industrial demand exceeding mine supply. But the state can't admit that. They can't admit their green revolution is impossible. They can't admit the solar targets require more silver than exists. So they blame individuals, they blame hoarders, and they confiscate the metal to keep the illusion alive for a few more months. Let me show you the timeline. Let me show you how fast this unravels globally. Q1, 2026. China arrests hoarders. 5,000 tons seized. Other countries take notes. Q2, 2026. India passes Strategic Metals Regulation Act. Registration required for holdings over 1 ton. Q3, 2026. Russia announces temporary requisition of private precious metals for national reserves. Q4, 2026. EU proposes Critical Materials Mobilization Directive. Member states can demand private stockpiles. 2027. United States passes emergency legislation. Silver above 10,000 ounces requires federal reporting. 2028, confiscation goes global. Every country with a deficit starts seizing. That's the roadmap. China just laid the foundation. The rest follows. Now, let's address the quiet question everyone's asking. Where do you hide it? The answer, you don't. Not really. Physical silver is bulky. 100 tons requires serious storage. A warehouse, a vault, a facility. You can't hide that in your basement. You can't bury it in the backyard. It's too much volume. So large holders use professional vaults, bonded warehouses, secured facilities. And every one of those facilities has records, has manifests, has government licenses. When the state wants to find your silver, they just subpoena the vault operators. And the vault operators comply because they have no choice. Small holders have an advantage. 1,000 ounces fits in a safe. 10,000 ounces fits in a closet. If you're below the radar, you might be safe. For now. But the threshold will lower. 100 tons today, 10 tons tomorrow, 1 ton next year. Eventually, everyone's holding becomes excessive. Everyone's a potential target. Let me show you the cruel irony. The trap that China's investors fell into. They bought silver to protect themselves from government monetary policy, from inflation, from currency debasement. They looked at the money printing, they looked at the debt, they looked at the unsustainable growth model, and they said, I don't trust the system. I'm opting out. I'm buying hard assets. And the system responded, you don't get to opt out. Your assets are ours when we need them. They tried to escape, and they got trapped. Because there's no escape from a system that claims sovereignty over everything within its borders. Your silver isn't yours, it's the state's. You're just the custodian. And when the state needs it, the illusion of ownership disappears. This is the lesson. This is the warning they're sending. You can own silver, but only as much as we allow. And we decide the limit, and the limit can change anytime. Now let's talk about the investors who got away. Let me show you who's safe, for now. The ones who moved their metal out of China years ago, the ones who saw this coming and relocated to Switzerland, to Singapore, to London, they're safe, for now. Because those jurisdictions haven't criminalized ownership yet, but the Chinese government is watching, they're tracking, they're building cases. Capital flight is illegal in China. Moving large assets overseas requires approval. Many of these moves weren't approved. So the state can claim the overseas silver is stolen, is the proceeds of illegal capital flight, and they can demand repatriation. Switzerland has refused. So far, Singapore is more compliant, London is political, it's a game of diplomatic pressure, and China has leverage. Investment partnerships, bilateral agreements. How long before Singapore agrees to freeze Chinese-owned silver accounts? How long before London cooperates with an extradition request? The metal might be physically outside China, but if the owner is a Chinese national, the state claims it anyway. There's no safe haven. Not really. Not for someone under Chinese jurisdiction. Let me show you the market reaction, or rather, the lack of reaction. You'd think 5,000 tons of silver being confiscated would move the market. That's 160 million ounces. That's a significant supply addition. But the price didn't drop. The price didn't move at all. Why? Because the metal didn't hit the market. It went straight to industrial users. It's already consumed, already gone. The market didn't see it. The confiscation was invisible to price discovery. What the market does see? Reduced private demand from China. Wealthy Chinese selling their smaller positions out of fear. That creates selling pressure. So the headline is, China confiscates 5,000 tons. The price effect? Bearish, because scared investors are selling. But the reality, 5,000 tons just got permanently removed from the available supply. It's not coming back. It's being melted into solar panels. The short-term price action is bearish. The long-term supply dynamic is explosively bullish. Now let's talk about what this means for Western investors. Let me show you why this isn't just a China problem. If you're holding silver in New York and London and Zurich, you might think, I'm safe. My government respects property rights. Maybe, for now. But rights are conditional, and in a crisis, conditions change. The United States has confiscated gold before, 1933, Executive Order 6102. The justification then, national emergency, economic crisis. Hoarding was harming the recovery. What's the justification next time? National security, defense production, critical infrastructure. The factories can't get silver. The grid is failing. The military supply chain is breaking. And you're sitting on 10,000 ounces in a private vault. Just holding it, not using it. How long before that becomes excessive? Before that becomes unpatriotic? Before that becomes a target? Property rights are strong. Until they're not. And the line between strong and gone is a single executive order. China showed the path. The West is watching. And considering, let me show you the final warning. The signal you cannot ignore. When a government starts arresting people for owning too much of something, that something is critically important. They don't arrest hoarders of pencils. They don't arrest hoarders of furniture. They arrest hoarders of things the state desperately needs and can't get enough of. Gold in 1933, silver in 2025. The arrests are the proof that the shortage is real, the proof that the state is panicking, the proof that the supply situation is so dire they're willing to criminalize ownership to get the metal. This isn't bearish for silver. This is the most bullish signal possible, because it proves that at any price there isn't enough, that private owners need to be dispossessed for the system to survive. When ownership becomes a crime, the thing you own is the most valuable thing in the world. China just told you. Silver is so important, we'll destroy property rights to get it. And they expect you to think that's bearish. The arrests happened. The confiscation is real. 5,000 tons gone. And the message is spreading to India, to Russia, to Europe, to every government facing the same deficit. Silver isn't an investment anymore. It's a strategic resource. And strategic resources belong to the state. You can hold it, for now. As long as the state allows. As long as you're below the threshold. But the threshold is moving. And the justification is ready. Economic sabotage, national security, hoarding during a shortage. The framework is built. The precedent is set. The arrests have begun. China moved first. The rest are preparing. And when the confiscation goes global, when every government decides it needs the metal more than its citizens do, there won't be anywhere to hide. The only question is, are you below the threshold or are you next? By the time they knock on your door, it's already too late.